The city, a sprawling beast of brick and glass, often felt like a series of closed doors, each one guarding a secret I wasn't privy to. I existed within it, a quiet observer, a curator of other people's stories in the hushed, dusty archives where I worked. My own story, I often thought, was yet to be written. Or perhaps it was just a blank page waiting for an author brave enough to begin. I found comfort in the predictable rhythm of my days, the scent of old paper and leather, the gentle click of the keyboard, the occasional polite exchange with a researcher. It was a life built on order, a fragile fortress against the chaos I often felt swirling, unbidden, within my own mind. I yearned for something more, a profound resonance, a connection that could shatter the glass between me and the world. But fear kept my longing a quiet hum, safely tucked away. Then Julian walked in, or rather, I walked into his orbit. It was a drizzly October evening, the kind where the streetlights blurred into ethereal halos against the darkening sky, reflecting off slick cobblestones. I had ventured out to a small gallery opening, more out of a sense of duty to a friend than genuine interest. The air inside was thick with the chatter of polite strangers and the clinking of glasses, a sensory overload I usually found draining. I gravitated towards a corner, drawn by a series of charcoal sketches, raw, visceral portraits that seemed to peel back the skin of their subjects to reveal the trembling soul beneath. It was while I was lost in the intensity of a particular set of eyes, etched onto paper with an almost violent tenderness, that I felt a presence beside me. I didn't look up immediately, mesmerized, but a subtle shift in the air, a warmth, drew my gaze. He was there, standing impossibly close, his eyes, dark and fathomless, already fixed on me. Not on the art, not on the room, but on me. Julian. His name, when he finally spoke it, was a soft caress against the din, a sound that seemed to unravel the tension in the room, making it coalesce around us instead. "They speak to you," he said, his voice a low timbre, rich with an almost unsettling familiarity. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a declaration. He didn't ask what they said or how they spoke. He simply knew. My breath hitched. No one had ever seen me with such immediate clarity. It was as if he had reached into the quietest, most hidden chamber of my heart and plucked out the very chord that resonated with those drawings. My usual defenses, the carefully constructed walls of polite distance, crumbled in an instant. "They do," I managed, my voice a whisper, foreign to my own ears. He smiled then, a slow, unfolding gesture that softened the intensity of his gaze, making him utterly captivating. "I know that feeling," he murmured, stepping infinitesimally closer. His scent, a mix of old books, charcoal, and something uniquely masculine and earthy, enveloped me. To find a reflection of your own soul in something else. It's a dangerous thing, isn't it? To be so completely seen. Dangerous. The word resonated with an unexpected truth. It was dangerous because it was exhilarating. It was dangerous because it felt like falling, before I'd even had a chance to stand steady. We talked for hours that night, standing in that crowded gallery as if we were the only two people left on Earth. The crowd ebbed and flowed around us, a distant murmur. Julian didn't just listen, he absorbed. He leaned in, his dark eyes never leaving mine, making me feel as though every word I uttered was the most profound truth he had ever heard. He spoke of art, of philosophy, of the human condition, with a depth that mirrored my own unspoken thoughts. He spoke of loneliness, of yearning, of the desperate need for understanding, and with each word, A piece of my carefully guarded interior space seemed to open, beckoning him in. "You have such a vivid inner world, Clara," he said, tracing the rim of his wineglass, his gaze still holding mine. "I can almost see the colors swirling behind your eyes." No one had ever acknowledged my inner world, let alone seen it. I felt a blush creep up my neck, a warmth that was both thrilling and disarming. It was as if he possessed a unique lens, capable of perceiving the parts of me I kept hidden even from myself. This wasn't just conversation, it was an excavation. He wasn't just connecting, he was burrowing deep into the very core of my being. We walked out into the persistent drizzle, the city lights shimmering around us, and the world felt suddenly sharper, more vibrant, infused with a new kind of meaning. He walked me home, his hand brushing against mine, an electric current passing between us with every accidental touch. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was charged, heavy with unspoken understanding, a promise of something profound. By the time we reached my doorstep, the rain had eased to a gentle mist. He stopped, turning to face me, and the intensity returned to his eyes, a ravenous hunger that momentarily stole my breath. "I feel like I've known you forever, Clara," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "Like I've been waiting for you my whole life." The words, so potent, so immediate, should have sounded like a cliché, a warning. But in that moment, under the soft glow of the street lamp, they felt like destiny. They felt like the answer to every silent prayer, every unarticulated yearning. My heart, usually a quiet drummer, began to pound a frantic, exhilarating rhythm. I felt a wild, untamed joy surge through me, a feeling so potent it bordered on pain. From that night, our world rapidly contracted. Days blurred into nights, marked not by the rising and setting of the sun, but by the relentless, consuming force of Julian's presence. He called me constantly, his voice a balm, a lifeline, pulling me away from my quiet tasks, drawing me into his orbit. He wanted to know everything, my childhood dreams, my deepest fears, the mundane details of my day, the intricate workings of my mind. And I, starved for such attention, willingly, eagerly laid myself bare. I told him about my quiet life, about the books that were my only companions, about the subtle melancholy that often clung to me like a damp cloak. He listened without judgment, without interruption, his eyes reflecting a deep empathy that made me feel utterly understood, utterly safe. He saw the fragility beneath my composed exterior, the yearning beneath my quietude, and he spoke to those parts of me with a tenderness that felt like a revelation. "You're a wildflower, Clara," he'd say, tracing the line of my jaw with his thumb, his gaze unwavering. "Hidden amongst the concrete, blooming beautifully for those with eyes to truly see." His words were intoxicating. They were the validation I hadn't known I so desperately craved. In his eyes, I wasn't just Clara, the archivist, the quiet observer. I was a muse, a delicate, complex creature worthy of profound adoration. He made me feel beautiful, intelligent, endlessly fascinating. It was a potent elixir, designed to fill every hollow space within me, to make me feel whole. He consumed my time, not with demands, but with an insatiable hunger for my presence. Every spare moment became our moment. A quick coffee turned into hours of intense conversation. A planned evening alone became a shared one, his apartment or mine, filled with the comfortable weight of his presence, the intoxicating scent of him. If I mentioned plans with a friend, he would sigh, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, but one that twisted a knot in my stomach. "I was hoping to see you tonight," he'd say, his voice laced with a gentle disappointment that felt like a rebuke. "I miss you already." And just like that, guilt would blossom, a thorny vine around my heart. How could I choose anything or anyone else over this profound connection, over the man who saw my soul? My friends, initially understanding, slowly faded into the background, their calls unanswered, their invitations declined. They didn't understand, I reasoned. They couldn't possibly comprehend the depth of what Jillian and I shared. He would call it love, an undeniable, all-consuming love. "We're meant to be, Clara," he'd whisper against my skin, his words seeping into my very bones. "Two halves of a singular whole. I need you. I need all of you." And I believed him. More than that, I felt him. His need mirrored my own, or so I convinced myself. I craved his presence like a thirsty plant craved water. His touch was an anchor, his gaze a mirror, reflecting back a version of myself I longed to be. I began to orbit him, my world shrinking to the circumference of his affection. My thoughts, once scattered, now coalesced around him, around us. One evening, curled against him on his sofa, listening to the rain beat a steady rhythm against the window pane, he spoke of our future, not in vague terms, but with a terrifying precision. He spoke of a life intertwined, of shared dreams, of a bond that would never break. He held me close, so close I could feel the steady beat of his heart against my ear, and in that moment I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, a terrifying completeness. I closed my eyes, letting his words wash over me, each one a thread weaving a cocoon around me. It was warm, comforting, utterly safe. But deep down, a tiny, almost imperceptible tremor of unease rippled through me. The weight of his love, so profound, so absolute, felt less like a gentle embrace and more like a binding. But I pushed the thought away, deep into the recesses of my mind. This was love, I told myself. This was everything I had ever wanted, to be truly seen, truly wanted, truly loved. And in that surrender, in that willing collapse into his arms, I felt my wings, once only a quiet longing, begin to unfurl. Not in flight, but in a heavy, irreversible descent into his profound, consuming gravity. He never explicitly forbade me from seeing them, but his reactions, subtle yet potent, were enough. If I mentioned meeting a friend, his face would cloud. A faint tremor of disappointment would cross his features. Or he'd turn away, focusing intently on something else. Later, he might say, "I just feel like we have so little time together, Clara. These moments are precious, don't you think?" The question was innocent, almost tender, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken accusations. It implied that my desire for separate friendships was a betrayal of our precious singular bond. And I, desperate to soothe any perceived hurt in him, desperate to prove my unwavering devotion, would capitulate. The guilt was a heavy cloak, smothering any flicker of independence. I was choosing him, always him. And wasn't that what love was? Unconditional devotion? His criticisms, when they began, were veiled in concern, always framed as being for my own good. "You wear too much gray, Clara," he'd say, examining my outfit with a critical yet affectionate gaze. "You have such beautiful skin. You should really wear colors that make you glow." Or, "Are you sure you want to say that to your boss? You're so sensitive, my love. You don't want to be misunderstood." Each comment, a tiny, almost imperceptible prick, was designed to reshape me, to mold me into his ideal. And I, rather than resisting, found myself scrutinizing my choices, wondering if Julian was right. Was my gray sweater too drab? Was I indeed too sensitive, too prone to misinterpretation? His perception became my reality, his judgment my internal compass. The internal monologue intensified. He sees me so clearly. He knows what's best for me. He only wants me to be my best self. These thoughts became a mantra, a defense against the growing unease. I needed his approval, his validation, his constant affirmation. If he seemed distant, even for a moment, a cold dread would seize me. Had I done something wrong, said something foolish? I would replay our last conversation, dissecting every word, searching for the flaw in myself. My happiness became entirely contingent on his mood, his attention. One evening, I returned home from work, feeling particularly drained. A difficult day at the archives, a minor bureaucratic tangle. I wanted to unwind, to lose myself in a book, to simply exist in my own quiet space. But Julian was already there, perched on my sofa, a half-empty glass of wine in his hand, a complex expression on his face. He looked up as I entered, and his eyes, usually so warm and encompassing, held a subtle edge. "You look tired," he observed, his voice flat. He didn't rise to greet me. My heart sank. The exhaustion, which had been purely physical, instantly morphed into an emotional burden. "It was just a long day," I said, forcing a smile. "Nothing I can't handle." He sighed, a soft, weary sound that pierced me. "Sometimes, Clara, I worry about you. You carry so much weight. You always seem to be struggling." He paused, taking a slow sip of wine, his gaze fixed on some point beyond me. "I just wish you'd let me take some of that burden. Let me protect you." I felt a surge of tenderness, and simultaneously, a familiar pang of inadequacy. He saw my weariness, my struggles, and he wanted to shield me. It was beautiful, wasn't it? But beneath the tenderness, a thread of something else, something sharp and cold, began to weave its way into my consciousness. Was he suggesting I couldn't handle it? Was he seeing me as weak? "I'm fine, Julian, truly," I insisted, trying to project an air of resilience I didn't quite feel. He finally looked at me, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Are you? Because sometimes, Clara, you put on such a brave face, but I see the cracks. I see the little girl inside who just wants to be safe, to be cherished, to be taken care of." He rose then, finally, and wrapped his arms around me, pulling me into a tight embrace. His touch, usually so comforting, now felt strangely constricting. "Let me take care of you," he murmured into my hair. "Let me be your strength." The words were so seductive, so appealing to the weary parts of my soul. To surrender, to let go, to be completely cared for. It felt like an offer of salvation. But as he held me, a faint, almost imperceptible shiver ran through me. A little girl inside. Was that how he truly saw me? Not as an equal, but as someone needing protection, someone inherently fragile? The thought was fleeting, quickly dismissed, replaced by the warmth of his embrace, the intoxicating sense of his skin. He loves me. He just wants to protect me. Still, the seeds of doubt, once planted, had a way of germinating in the quiet hours of the night. I found myself waking with a start, a nameless anxiety coiling in my gut. What was I losing? Who was I becoming? The Clara who once delighted in her own company, who found joy in solitary pursuits, felt like a stranger now. My thoughts were consumed by Julian, what he was doing, what he was thinking, what he needed. His presence, whether physical or emotional, was a constant, almost overwhelming hum in my mind. He once told me, with that intense, focused gaze, that I was like a mirror for him. You reflect back to me the best parts of myself, Clara. Without you, I feel incomplete, like a puzzle missing its most vital piece. And I, in my deep-seated need to be essential, to be chosen, embraced this responsibility. I became his mirror, his missing piece, his emotional anchor. My own reflection began to blur, distorted by the image he needed me to be. The quiet moments when he wasn't around, instead of being a respite, became voids, a gnawing emptiness. I would pace my apartment, glance at my phone, the silence echoing, amplifying the hollowness inside. Where was he? Was he thinking of me? Why hadn't he called? The anxiety would build, a suffocating pressure, until the chime of a text or the ring of a call from him would bring a wave of relief so intense it felt like physical pain melting away. It was a cycle, a relentless rhythm of craving and temporary satiation. I had begun to notice the subtle inconsistencies, the small shifts in his narrative, the way his stories sometimes changed in the telling. A past event might be recounted with a different nuance, a different emotional weight. Once, I gently pointed out a discrepancy, a detail about a shared memory. His eyes, usually so open, narrowed, and a flash of something hard, something I couldn't quite identify, crossed his face. "You're overthinking it, Clara," he said, his voice clipped, a shade colder than usual. "My memory isn't perfect. Why are you trying to nitpick?" I instantly recoiled, my heart pounding. Nitpick? I hadn't meant to. I was just trying to understand, to reconcile the details. The accusation stung. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to." He softened immediately, his hand reaching for mine, his thumb stroking my knuckles. "My sweet, sensitive Clara," he murmured, his voice back to his usual tenderness. "You worry too much. It's just a silly detail. Don't burden yourself with such things. Just trust me." And I did. I pushed down the discomfort, the fleeting sense of confusion. Just trust him. It became another mantra, another pillar in the increasingly fragile edifice of my new reality. Trust him because he loved me. Trust him because he saw me. Trust him because without him, I felt utterly, terrifyingly lost. The heavy, consuming gravity was no longer a descent. It was a permanent state, and I was perpetually falling, held only by the threads of his affection, threads that, to my increasingly anxious heart, sometimes felt taut to the point of breaking. I was bound, tethered, and the thought of severing those ties was more terrifying than the silent, creeping suffocation. Part 3. The image of the little girl, vulnerable and in need of protection that Julian had painted for me, began to subtly reshape my perception of myself. I, Clara, the meticulous archivist, the solitary seeker of forgotten truths, started to see my own quiet strength as a kind of fragility. My job, once a source of deep personal satisfaction, started to feel like a burden, something that drew me away from Julian, from the only place I now truly felt seen and validated. He would often call during work hours, his voice a soft intrusion into the quiet reverence of the archives. "Are you still surrounded by those dusty old papers, my love?" he'd ask, a gentle teasing in his tone, but one that carried a sting. Don't you ever wish for something more vibrant? Something that truly reflects the beautiful, creative soul I know you possess? His words were potent, laced with the intoxicating promise of a grander, more colorful existence, an existence he alone seemed capable of unveiling for me. I'd look at the rows of ancient volumes, the delicate etchings of maps, the faded elegance of handwritten letters, and for the first time, a shadow of doubt would fall over them. Were they truly vibrant enough for me? Or was I settling, hiding behind their comforting predictability, as Julian so deftly implied? He began to suggest other paths, other possibilities, always phrased as questions, as gentle nudges towards my supposed true potential. You have such an intuitive understanding of people, Clara. Have you ever considered something more interactive? Something where your empathy could truly shine? The irony was not lost on the deeper, quieter parts of my mind, the parts that still faintly remembered a self before Julian. My empathy had once been a source of quiet strength, a tool for understanding the intricate narratives of history.
Now it was being twisted, redefined to serve his vision of me, a vision that increasingly minimized my current reality. I found myself questioning my commitment to my career, seeing it through his critical, yet loving lens. The thought of leaving it, of shedding the skin he deemed ill-fitting, would bring a terrifying thrill, immediately followed by the desolate whisper of, what then? Julian had become the sole architect of my future, the only one who truly understood what I needed. My social landscape, once dotted with a few cherished, if infrequent, friendships, was now a barren wasteland. The phone, once occasionally buzzing with a friend's name, was silent, save for Julian's calls and texts. The guilt of my neglect was a raw wound, but the thought of reaching out, of explaining this new, all-consuming life, felt impossible. How could I articulate a love so profound it had swallowed my world whole? They wouldn't understand. They would judge. And Julian, ever so perceptive, seemed to sense this burgeoning isolation, reinforcing it with a tender possessiveness. Who needs those superficial connections, Clara, when we have this? He'd ask, drawing me closer, his eyes intense. This profound connection, this understanding that transcends words. This is real. This is everything. And in those moments, wrapped in his arms, suspended in the bubble of our shared intensity, it truly felt like everything. The emptiness that had previously been filled by friends, by solitary hobbies, by the quiet joy of my work, was now replaced by the overwhelming, singular force of Julian. It was a suffocating plenitude, but it was his, and therefore it felt right. The emotional pendulum between his ardent affection and his subtle withdrawals became a brutal, rhythmic dance that dictated the rhythm of my days. One moment I was his muse, his confidant, the most precious person in his life. He would shower me with compliments, with declarations of love so passionate they took my breath away. You are the light of my world, Clara, my reason for being. He would hold my gaze, his dark eyes brimming with an emotion so deep, it felt like a physical current passing between us. Then, just as suddenly, a subtle chill would descend. A quiet distance would creep in, imperceptible to anyone but me, but searingly obvious to my hyper-attuned senses. A missed call, a delayed text, a flicker of boredom in his eyes during our conversations.
He wouldn't be overtly cruel. He would simply recede, leaving behind an aching void that only his attention could fill. The anxiety would coil in my gut, a cold, sickening dread. What had I done? Had I said something wrong? Was he slipping away? I would replay every interaction, dissect every word, searching for the crack, the flaw, the reason for his withdrawal. My mind became a relentless, self-flagellating machine. I shouldn't have worn that. I shouldn't have expressed that opinion. I shouldn't have asked for too much. And then, with a desperate longing, I would pursue him, subtly at first, then more overtly, needing to bridge the gap, needing to reclaim his affection. A tentative text, a carefully worded question, a sudden gesture of affection on my part. And when he finally returned to me, his warmth washing over me once more, the relief was so profound it bordered on euphoria. The cycle was addictive, a cruel loop of pain and temporary salvation, each reunion solidifying the belief that I was responsible for maintaining his love, that his presence was a prize I constantly had to earn. My physical space, once my sanctuary, began to morph into a shared territory, then increasingly, his territory. He started leaving things at my apartment, a toothbrush, a change of clothes, then his books, his art supplies, not asked for, not discussed, just left. I would find his scent lingering on my pillows, his coffee mug on my counter, and a strange mix of comfort and invasion would wash over me. It felt like a tangible manifestation of our intertwined lives, a physical symbol of our unbreakable bond. But it also felt like my walls were dissolving, my personal boundaries eroding, one forgotten item at a time. One afternoon, I found him rummaging through my desk drawer, where I kept a small leather-bound journal. My heart seized. It was a private space, filled with scattered thoughts, anxieties, and the quiet musings I rarely shared. "Julian," I said, my voice a shaky whisper, "what are you doing?" He looked up, a soft, almost wounded expression on his face, the journal held loosely in his hand. "Oh, Clara, I was just looking for a pen, and then I saw this, your beautiful handwriting. I was just admiring it." He smiled, a tender, disarming smile. "I'm sorry, my love. I know it's personal. I can't help but want to know every part of you, every secret thought. It's because I love you so much."
He extended the journal to me, but his fingers brushed mine for a moment, and his gaze held mine, a silent plea for understanding. "I just want to understand you better, my wildflower. Every delicate petal, every hidden root. The violation, the raw sense of having my privacy breached, warred with the overwhelming tenderness in his eyes, the sincerity of his words. He loves me. He just wants to know me completely. How could I fault him for such profound adoration? The anger, the sense of trespass, dissolved, replaced by a familiar wave of guilt. I should be grateful for such depth of feeling. I should be more open, more willing to share everything. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to connect. So I took the journal, and later I found myself leaving it out, sometimes even open to a page, a silent invitation, a desperate offering, hoping it would satisfy his hunger, hoping it would keep the chill away. The gaslighting became more frequent, more insidious. Arguments, if they could even be called that, were never truly arguments. They were always me, twisting something, misunderstanding, being overly emotional. If I tried to express a feeling of hurt or confusion, he would tilt his head, a look of profound sorrow on his face. "Clara, my love, why do you insist on creating drama where there is none? I never said that. You're imagining things. You're so sensitive. You catastrophize everything." He would sigh, a heavy, weary sound, as if my emotional distress was a profound burden he had to carry. I began to doubt my own memory, my own sanity. Had he really said that? Was I truly making things up? My internal world, once a fortress of quiet certainty, became a shifting landscape of doubt and confusion. I would apologize, profusely, for my overreactions, for my misinterpretations, for my sensitivity. Each apology chipped away at my self-trust, leaving me more reliant on his version of reality, his interpretation of events. The pain, a constant, dull ache beneath the surface of my skin,
was always justified by the love. He loves me so intensely that he sometimes loses himself. His passion is so great, it can be overwhelming. He is only trying to make me better, to shape me into the woman he knows I can be. I clung to these justifications like a drowning person clings to a piece of driftwood. The alternative, that the man who claimed to love me so profoundly was actually hurting me, was too terrifying to contemplate.
It would mean the entire edifice of my new life, this profound, all-consuming connection, was a lie, and I was too deeply entrenched, too desperately dependent, to tear it all down. My sleep became fractured, haunted by restless dreams and waking anxieties. My appetite dwindled. The constant knot in my stomach was a familiar companion. I felt perpetually on edge, always anticipating, always trying to read Julian's mood, to preempt any potential discord. My own desires, my own needs, my own voice faded into the background, a distant echo in the overwhelming symphony of Julian's presence. I was losing myself, piece by agonizing piece, and the awareness of it, a sharp, cold jab of truth, would occasionally pierce through the fog of dependency, only to be quickly smothered by the terror of being utterly alone. The cage was almost complete, its bars woven from my own desperate need for love and his relentless, suffocating adoration. And I, with my unfurled, heavy wings, was trapped, unable to fly, unable to fall, suspended in the agonizing space between love and self-destruction. Part 4. The suffocating plenitude Julian had woven around me had by now become my entire world. The heavy, unfurled wings I once felt were now not just heavy, but bound, pinned beneath the crushing weight of his presence. My internal monologue, once a quiet conversation with myself, was now an incessant, frantic debate, Julian's voice subtly intertwined with my own, twisting my thoughts, blurring the lines between my truth and his. My job at the archives, which had once been a steady anchor, a testament to my independent life, became a battleground of guilt and obligation. Each morning, the thought of leaving him, even for a few hours, felt like a betrayal. He'd often wake before me, his eyes already on my face, a possessive tenderness in their depths. "Must you go, my love?" he'd murmur, his hand stroking my hair. "Can't you stay, just for today? I miss you so much when you're gone. The apartment feels empty without your light." The words were so gentle, so laced with a yearning that mirrored my own desperate need for connection. How could I say no to such vulnerability, such profound affection? Each time I hesitated, the guilt would bloom, hot and sharp in my chest. He needs me. He misses me. What kind of person prioritizes dusty books over the man who loves her so completely? Slowly, insidiously, my work attendance became sporadic. My colleagues, once familiar faces, became distant. Their polite questions about my well-being met with vague, anxious answers. The sense of purpose I once derived from my work was replaced by a hollow emptiness, a feeling that I was only truly alive, truly valuable, when I was with Julian. My physical appearance, too, became another canvas for his gentle control. He would pick out my clothes, always with a loving smile, always with a reason. "This color makes your eyes sparkle, Clara," or "That dress accentuates your beautiful figure." If I chose something he hadn't approved of, a subtle frown would cross his face, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "Are you sure about that one, my love? It doesn't quite capture your essence." The words were soft, but the message was clear. My choices were inadequate, my own sense of style flawed, and I, desperately seeking his approval, desperate to please, would change, transforming myself piece by piece into the woman he envisioned. The emotional manipulation grew more sophisticated, more ingrained. Julian had mastered the art of the implied threat, the unspoken consequence. If I expressed a desire for alone time or showed even a hint of independent thought, he wouldn't outright forbid it. Instead, he would retreat, a subtle coldness emanating from him, a withdrawal of affection that felt like the world was crumbling around me. He'd become quiet, his gaze distant, his answers monosyllabic. The air between us would thicken, heavy with unspoken disappointment, and I, desperately seeking his approval, desperate to please, would change, transforming myself piece by piece into the woman he envisioned. One night, after a particularly strained silence, I found myself weeping, curled on the floor, begging him to tell me what I had done wrong. He knelt beside me, his hands gently framing my face, his palm wiping away a tear. "Oh, Clara, my sweet, sensitive Clara," he'd whispered, his voice laced with sorrow. "You carry so much pain inside you. You're always looking for conflict, for reasons to be hurt. I just want you to be happy. Why do you fight it so much?" His words twisted the knife, yet simultaneously offered a perverse comfort. He wasn't mad at me. I was just broken, and he, in his boundless love, was simply trying to fix me. He wasn't the source of my pain. I was. My mind, so accustomed to justifying his behavior, readily accepted this new narrative. I was the problem. My sensitivity, my tendency to catastrophize, my inability to just be happy with his love. The self-doubt became a consuming fire, burning away any last vestiges of my self-worth. I was a burden, a complicated creature who was difficult to love, and he, Julian, was a saint for trying. The world outside our apartment walls became a blurry, indistinct landscape. I rarely ventured out alone, and when I did, it was with a pervasive sense of anxiety, a feeling that something was missing, that I was incomplete with Julian by my side. The city, once a source of quiet observation, now felt overwhelming, too loud, too indifferent. His voice became the only voice I truly heard, his opinions the only ones that mattered. He started managing my finances, gently suggesting that I was too soft for the complexities of money, that he could ensure my future stability. My bank account, once a personal domain, became a shared entity, then primarily his to oversee. "It's just practical, my love," he'd said, his smile reassuring. "We're a team. Everything we have is ours. Let me take care of these things so you don't have to worry your pretty little head." The relief at first was immense. To shed another burden, to simply trust him with my security, felt like another act of profound love. But beneath the relief, a tiny, cold dread lingered. My autonomy, once a quiet given, was now being systematically dismantled, piece by agonizing piece. The emotional abuse escalated, subtly, insidiously. His words, once intoxicating, now often carried barbs wrapped in a veneer of concern. "You're so fragile, Clara. You're too easily swayed. If I wasn't here, who would protect you?" Or after I made a small mistake, "See, my love, this is why I worry about you. You're so scattered sometimes. You need me to keep you grounded." Each statement, a carefully aimed dart, chipped away at my confidence, leaving me feeling incompetent, helpless, utterly dependent. I began to have vivid nightmares, fragmented, terrifying glimpses of being lost in a vast, empty space, calling out for Julian, but only hearing my own echoing cries. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, reaching for him, needing the warmth of his body, the certainty of his presence, to dispel the chilling remnants of the dream. He was my anchor,
my only reality.
The idea of living without him was not just painful, it was unimaginable, a void too terrifying to even glance into. The love and the pain were so intricately woven together that I could no longer separate them. His touch, which could soothe my deepest anxieties, could also, in the next moment, feel like a brand marking me as his property. His words, which could lift me to dizzying heights, could also plunge me into despair. I was a prisoner of this exquisite agony, desperately clinging to the moments of tenderness, convinced that they were the true essence of our love, and the pain was merely a byproduct, a testament to its intensity. My inner monologue was a frantic scramble for justification. He's just passionate. He loves me so much he can't bear to be without me. He sees my flaws and wants to help me be better. This is what real love feels like. Raw, all-consuming, sometimes painful, but always real. The echoes of my old self, the Clara who cherished independence and quiet contemplation, were now faint whispers, almost entirely drowned out by the thunderous roar of Julian's presence in my mind. One rainy afternoon, as I sat alone in the apartment, Julian having gone out for a few hours, a sudden blinding flash of clarity pierced through the fog. I was looking at a photograph of myself from before Julian, a picture taken at a friend's birthday. I was smiling, a genuine, unburdened smile, my eyes sparkling with a quiet confidence. The person in that photograph felt like a stranger. Her eyes held a light that was utterly absent from my own reflection now. Her posture, relaxed and open, was a stark contrast to the guarded, almost hunched way I now carried myself. A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. The girl in the photo, she was me. A version of me that Julian had systematically erased. The realization was a physical punch to the gut, stealing the air from my lungs. The quiet confidence, the independent spirit, the spark in her eyes, where had it gone? Then the insidious justification mechanism kicked in, swift and brutal. She was lonely. She was waiting for me. I brought her to life. This is the price of true love. But this time the words felt hollow, a fragile shield against a terrifying truth that was trying to break through. The image of the little girl needing protection, the wildflower needing to be tended by him, it was a lie. I hadn't been weak then. I had been whole. The terror of this realization was quickly followed by an even deeper, more profound terror, the fear of what would happen if I acknowledged this truth, if I admitted that this wasn't love, but something else, something destructive. What would be left? Julian was my world. He was my identity, my security, my only source of perceived worth. To lose him would be to lose everything, to face a void so vast and terrifying that death itself seemed a kinder prospect. So I pushed the photograph away, burying it beneath a pile of magazines. I tried to shake off the chilling clarity, to re-immerse myself in the comforting illusion of our profound love. But the image of that girl, my old self, lingered, a ghost haunting the edges of my consciousness, a silent accusation. The threads that bound me to Julian, once so comforting, now felt like chains, tightening, constricting, threatening to extinguish the very last spark of the person I once was. And for the first time, a truly terrifying question echoed in the deepest, most hidden chamber of my heart. Was I already gone? The romantic tension was no longer about the push and pull of affection, but the agonizing internal tug of war between the remnants of myself and the consuming shadow of Julian. Part 5. The ghost of the girl in the photograph,
my old self, became a persistent phantom. She haunted the periphery of my vision, a silent accusation, a stark reminder of what had been lost. Julian, with his uncanny perception, seemed to sense this burgeoning shift, this subtle resistance stirring within the deepest chambers of my being. His grip tightened, not with overt force, but with an escalating, suffocating tenderness that felt more constricting than any chain. He began to speak of our future with an even greater, almost frantic intensity, not just intertwined lives, but a singular existence. "We are meant to be inseparable, Clara," he'd declare, pulling me into his embrace, his words a binding spell. "Two souls, perfectly matched, perfectly fused. Anything less is a betrayal of our destiny." He pushed for me to quit my job entirely, framing it as an act of liberation, a step towards a more fulfilling life with him. "Those archives hold you back, my love. They dim your light. Imagine what we could create together, free from those dreary walls." The thought of quitting, of entirely severing that last fragile tie to my former self, sent a tremor of raw terror through me.
But Julian painted such a vivid picture of our shared future, a life bathed in creativity, in intellectual pursuits, in unburdened love, that the terror was quickly overlaid with the seductive promise of freedom from the anxieties that now plagued my work. He was offering a beautiful cage, intricately gilded, and my depleted spirit was almost ready to step inside. He knows what's best for me. He sees my true potential. He wants to free me. The gaslighting became an almost constant hum, a relentless chipping away at my perception of reality. If I tried to express a feeling, however tentative, that deviated from his narrative, he would sigh, a long-suffering sound. "Clara, you're always so dramatic. Why do you insist on manufacturing problems? You're so sensitive, you blow everything out of proportion." He'd look at me with such profound sadness, as if my emotional state was a personal affront, a deliberate act of sabotage against our perfect love. "I just want to understand you, my love, but you make it so hard. You complicate everything." My mind became a battleground. His voice, calm and rational, battled with the frantic whispers of my own confusion. Am I truly so difficult? Am I imagining things? Is my pain just a byproduct of my own flawed nature? I would apologize again and again for being too much, for being sensitive, for being difficult. Each apology was a nail in the coffin of my self-trust. I was losing my ability to discern truth from manipulation, my own feelings from his projections. One evening, a seemingly trivial incident became the catalyst for a seismic shift within me. We were at his apartment, and I had been sketching quietly, a small, intricate drawing of a forgotten street corner, a fleeting echo of my old, solitary pursuits. Julian walked in, glanced at my sketchbook, and a subtle frown creased his brow. "That's interesting, Clara," he said, his voice carefully neutral. He picked up the sketchbook, his fingers lingering on the page, and I felt a familiar prickle of anxiety. "But it's so melancholic, so dark. Why do you always draw things like this? Why not something beautiful, something vibrant, something that reflects the joy we share?" He paused, then looked at me, a soft, wounded expression on his face. "Sometimes I wonder if you even see the joy in our life, Clara. I give you everything, and still you cling to these dark corners." The words, so gentle in their delivery, were a violent blow. Dark corners. He had always praised my art, my unique perspective, even if he subtly guided its direction. But this was different. This wasn't a gentle critique. It was a fundamental rejection of a part of my soul. It was a dismissal of my entire inner world, deemed not worthy, not joyful enough for his love. I felt a sudden, searing heat rise within me,
a flicker of something long dormant. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a cold, pure shock. He held my sketchbook, my small, private world, and he was telling me it was wrong. He was telling me I was wrong. My justifications, the intricate tapestry of excuses I had woven for Julian's behavior, suddenly, irrevocably began to unravel. The threads snapped, one after another, with a sickening clarity. He doesn't love me for who I am. He loves a version of me he wants me to be. The thought hit me like a physical force, knocking the breath from my lungs. The terror I'd always felt at the prospect of losing him was still there, a monstrous, gaping maw. But for the first time, it was overshadowed by an even greater terror, the terror of losing myself entirely, of truly, utterly disappearing. I saw it all, laid bare in that agonizing instant. The constant need for his validation, the incessant self-doubt, the fading friendships, the discarded career aspirations, the erosion of my personal boundaries, the creeping control over my appearance, my finances, my very thoughts. It wasn't love. Love didn't diminish you. Love didn't make you question your own sanity. Love didn't require you to constantly apologize for your existence. This was not love. This was emotional dependency, a parasitic vine choking the life out of everything that made me me. I had become so entwined, so utterly dependent on his affection, that I had mistaken the pain of suffocation for the intensity of passion. I had confused the terror of abandonment with the depth of connection. His profound gravity wasn't destiny. It was a black hole, pulling me into its crushing emptiness, consuming all light. My wings, which I had once imagined unfurling in his embrace, had never been meant to fly. They had been clipped, bound, and slowly, painstakingly withered away beneath his tender, possessive touch. And the little girl he saw, the one who needed protection, she was not me. She was a figment of his own need for control, a projection he had forced me to wear.
The real little girl inside me, the one who loved solitude and quiet truths, had been screaming, unheard, beneath the weight of his adoration. The silence in the room stretched, heavy with the unspoken realization that had just detonated in my soul. Julian, still holding my sketchbook, still with that wounded look, finally broke it. "Clara, are you even listening to me? I'm only trying to help you." His words, once capable of shattering my defenses, now sounded hollow, tinny, devoid of power. I looked at him, truly looked at him, not through the lens of my desperate need, but with a terrifying newfound clarity. I saw not the profound lover, but the architect of my cage. I saw the manipulation in his eyes, the subtle smirk that played around his lips even as his brow furrowed with feigned concern. I saw the reflection of my own exhaustion, my own fear, my own emptiness, etched on his face. "I am listening," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but firm, steady. It was the first time in months, perhaps even years, that I had truly heard my own voice, unadulterated by doubt or apology. "And I understand." He tilted his head, a flicker of something predatory entering his dark eyes, sensing the shift, the new, dangerous resolve in my tone. "Understand what, my love?" he asked, a subtle edge in his voice. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The words weren't for him. They were for me. They were the silent, deafening roar of a breaking spell. The realization was both liberation and excruciating pain. It was the moment the prisoner saw the bars for the first time, not as protection, but as confinement. I stood up, my legs feeling strangely heavy, yet imbued with a newfound strength. I walked towards him, slowly, deliberately, and gently took my sketchbook from his hand. His fingers brushed mine, and for the first time there was no electric current, only a chilling emptiness. I held the book to my chest,
a fragile shield against the storm that raged inside me. I looked at him, this man who had consumed my world, who had promised me love and delivered only dependence. The terror of the void without him was still there, a vast, swirling emptiness, but beneath it, a tiny, almost imperceptible spark of defiance had ignited. It was a spark of self-preservation, a desperate flicker of the Clara I had lost. I turned away from him, my heart a raw, bleeding wound, but my gaze fixed on the window, on the distant, shimmering city lights.
The city, once a series of closed doors, now seemed to beckon, vast and terrifying, but filled with the promise of unclaimed space. The journey back to myself would be arduous, fraught with pain and loneliness, a slow, agonizing climb out of the black hole he had created. But for the first time in a very long time, I knew I had to try. The unfurling wings might be tattered and weak, but they were still mine. And the first, most painful step was simply to acknowledge their existence, even if they couldn't yet fly. The silence that followed my internal declaration was not empty, but filled with the faint, trembling sound of a broken heart beginning, however falteringly, to beat for itself again.